Welcome to this ASRG webinar. Today's subject is vulnerability management. My name is Gilad Bandel, and today with me is Eden Ben Shabbat. Welcome, Eden. Can you please share with us some of your background?
I'm working in Simotive as a team leader of vulnerability management and analyst for the cybersecurity in the automotive industry. Also manage a product that detects automatically vulnerabilities and cybersecurity problems inside a vehicle called Car Alert. I'm also a member of the International ISO committee, the 21434. We are a member in the regulation committee because it's really important for Simotive to always stay up to date and be the most professional and relevant to our customers. I'm also an active member of ASRG, which I think is really important. And that's it, I think. Gilad, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, thank you. So I'm many years in the networking cybersecurity industry, OT, industrial control system, and in the past few years in the automotive. With Simotive, I'm doing business development and product marketing. We're filming today at the Simotive offices with this amazing view of Tel Aviv behind me. We are a growing company, recruiting all the time new people. Many people join us on a weekly basis. And then let's start speaking about our subject today. Can you please explain us a bit about vulnerability management, what's the meaning, why it's so important?
This topic is actually really exciting me and really close to me in the recent years, so I can chat about it for hours. Vulnerability management is something that is really essential for many, either IT and vehicle networks to evaluate and secure their networks. It's including detecting, assessing, and also mitigation for the vulnerability security inside networks. So as you know, Gilad, the vehicles becoming really sophisticated and connected. The functionalities and the autonomous capabilities always improving. So it's not only that, the vehicle is really becoming computer and network on wheels, which is a really great target for a cyber attacker or criminal. And each vehicle has its own interfaces, connected interfaces, if it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, GPS, cellular, and many others, which is also great attack surfaces. And not only that, each vehicle has about 70 ECUs, if not more, which each of those ECU has different functionalities. If it's the infotainment, the body control, the airbag, and so much more. From our experience, we see that each ECU has its own operating system, many of them based Unix, Linux kernel, and also many other open source software, which has a lot of potential vulnerabilities and exploit published over many online sources. So just think how great chance it is to attacker to remote attack a vehicle or even entire fleet. And not only that, not only the amount of data that exists of each vehicle, but also the regulations. If we are talking in regulation terms, as you know, the OEMs and suppliers are obligated to commit the regulation that was published in the beginning of 2021, which require them to be aligned in the full supply chain of the vehicle for vulnerability management, mitigation, detection, and so many other things, and risk assessment. And it requires them to do some reorganization. Many of them didn't face this cybersecurity culture before, so they have to do reorganization, new processes, tasks for that mission. So it's really challenging to do it in a really short amount of time.
So if we speak about the connected vehicle, we speak about the autonomous vehicles with automated driving, we speak about cooperative driving like platoons. All those are factors in the vulnerability management, and we need to manage them. If we look a bit at this chart that we prepared here, so we see that we have the pre-certification and the aftermarket phases that relate both to the vehicle and to the organization. The organization means OEM or Tier 1. So let's look at the phases. During the development phases, you need to do vulnerability management in the development, and you need to address it as early as possible, because the later you get in the process, the more expensive is the price that you need to pay for fixing a vulnerability that you could have fixed earlier. When we get to the type approval phase, if you're a Tier 1, you need to provide all the evidence and all the documentation required by the OEM. The OEM needs to aggregate all this information, put together whatever they have internally on their own, provide this for the regulation requirements for certification for an audit body that will certify the vehicle for automotive cybersecurity. Now it ain't over. We're moving to the post-production. Now the vehicle is on the road. We still need to monitor the vulnerabilities all along the way. So if you're a tier 1 and you have an ECU, you need to make sure that there is no new vulnerability. And if there's a new vulnerability which was detected, then you need to mitigate it while the vehicle is on the road by a software update over the air or things like this. If you're a OEM, then you need to monitor the whole vehicle and make sure that there are no new vulnerabilities detected. And if there are, you need to take action with your own software development group or with the T1s, so the vehicle will be safer on the road. Worst thing that can happen from the organization perspective is negative reputation. If you are a supplier, then in the eyes of the OEM, if you come with software which has a lot of vulnerabilities, you will be degraded. You might lose contracts. If you're an OEM, the brand impact can be severe in case of a cyber attack. Eden, maybe you give us some examples of brand damage that can be caused by or was actually caused by such events.
Yeah, so I really like the brand damage example because I always like to remind my team and also the customers that it's not only about the vulnerability management report. I'll give you an example. We always do the vulnerability and risk assessment report for each ECU for the customers, and when we do the report, let's say some ECU has 10 vulnerabilities, but afterwards some customer wake up in the morning and found out about a new vulnerability, such as the Log4Shell, which was really published. So they wake up in the morning and find about that and find all the noises around and all the vehicles that might be affected, and they have to know as fast as they can if they are also vulnerable to that. They can't let themselves to be published in a badly way. So that's why they want to get answered and as soon as they can. So that's something that always we tend to do, also to check the news and to see if there's something really known out there that our customer might be affected of.
So definitely vulnerability management can help OEMs and tier 1s in reducing such cases, saving lives, protecting properties, and protecting the brand. So Eden, can you please explain us a bit how can we cope with this vulnerability management? How can we address this challenge?
Yeah, of course. So because of the challenges we just mentioned, the many challenges for the OEMs and the suppliers, many of them decide to work with third-party companies like us to help them to meet the standards and regulation. There are many types of systems that can help go through the steps of the ISO. If it's an IDS system, CSMS system, PT teams, and so on. A vulnerability management solution that we use here in Simotiv is called CarAlert. My team uses this product to automatically detect all the vulnerabilities that exist in each ECU and vehicle. And it's not only about the detection, but also the product and each solution should know how to also be relevant to specifically to the vehicle. We will talk about it afterwards, about the differences between the IT and the vehicle, but to exactly tell what is the impact of each vulnerability for the vehicle, what is the most critical ones, and so on. And also I think that the combination of professional people with the system is a must, in my opinion, to find all the most relevant things and to give the most relevant and long-term recommendation for the customers and go with them end by end. I think this solution really helps to reduce the work and reduce the severe events that might occur if we won't do vulnerability management in that case.
So you are using CarAlert as a product which assists your team in providing the customer with the ability to comply with the regulation, a continuous monitor during the development for the type approval, and on the ongoing monitoring for vulnerabilities all along the vehicle life cycle, and all this to comply with the UNR 155 regulation and following the ISO SAE 21434 standard.
Yeah, also to mention one thing that I forgot to say, is that it actually knows to say if ECU is aligned with the regulation or not. As you know, that to meet the regulation, you must not have any vulnerability that is risk score is high or critical, so it really helps us to recognize it really fast.
So let's look about a few things that occurred in the industry, and there are two aspects to it. One of them would be automotive internal events, and others are IT to automotive events and areas. So let's look at two of them. Let's start maybe with the automotive internal case. A few words about Tbone, please.
So this is a classic example which I really like to use. Tbone was proof of concept attack which was developed by two hackers last May on Tesla infotainment. They used two new vulnerabilities on open source software called Conman, which is a connection management daemon for managing communication inside the embedded Linux devices. Specifically this software is really widely used in the automotive industry. So if it's relevant to Tesla, it may be relevant to many other vehicles. What this attack actually did is that those two hackers could use a drone up to 100 meters to remotely do things that a user, a driver, can do from their infotainment remotely. They can open the doors, turn up the lights, changing the music and so on, which can be really bad to while you're driving if something doing it remotely. The vulnerability was fixed from version 1.39, and Tesla decided to change this software to another software. We will talk about that concept about changing software later on, but what we do with those kind of things is that when something like this happens, customer immediately want to know first if he's vulnerable to that kind of attack. So this is its first question. Next, if it's vulnerable, so where? Which ECUs or vehicles are impacted because of those vulnerabilities? Next, he also wants to know, of course, how it will impact the vehicle and what is the mitigation plan? How can you reduce the risk? And not only that, even if the vulnerabilities really exist inside the code, it doesn't mean that they are affected as much as Tesla was affected. For example, some of our customers did have the code, but the infotainment architecture had many cybersecurity mechanisms, so it didn't allow it to be affected as much as it did on Tesla. So it's something that I really even don't have to change or reduce because the risk is really low in their infotainment.
The car alert was able to detect those things, analyze, provide all this information about the risk, the potential lateral movement, what would be the kill chain, and how this thing affects every single vehicle. So it might be different from vehicle to vehicle, and obviously the mitigation that you can propose to the customer would be different on a case-by-case basis. So let's look at another case which is in the automotive to the IT domain. Let's speak about the Bluetooth thing.
The last example we showed, it's the classic example, which is the easiest way. When we talk about something that happened in the vehicle, so it's really easy to say how it impacts on other vehicles. But what actually happens in the real world is that there are many vulnerabilities on the IT aspect. So how do you say how much and if it will impact on vehicles? For example, the Blueburn attack, which was really published a few years ago and harmed many devices. It was relevant to each device that has Bluetooth in some version, and also Linux kernel operating system and many other operating systems. An attacker could actually steal data from device and also spread malware really easily. The user didn't have to accept anything. So what do you do with this kind of attack? We know that quite a few vehicles are as their own Bluetooth. So how do you know if that something is if it's something that impacts also vehicles? So that's The same way we do the thing with the Tbone example, we also check if they have the right operating system, if they have the vulnerable software, also what is the functionality of Bluetooth inside the ECUs. You can see here that we always do some, we'll talk about it later, some profiling to each ECU to say what is its connectivity, what is functionalities. So all of that also helps to understand more if some IT vulnerability is relevant also to the vehicles. Okay, so Gilad, I want to ask you, how do you collect threat intelligence? How do you collect data?
So we are going to speak in the following few minutes regarding the whole process end-to-end, and we would start with the threat intelligence. So the basis of all this Scarlet product and the vulnerability management is to have good intelligence. So we collect information from different sources on the internet, including NVD, including DB, exploit DB, and so on. So we have crawlers which are running along the internet, collecting all this information and bringing it to our database. Maybe you can give some examples.
It's not only about the CVEs and vulnerabilities and so on. You know, there are many unknown vulnerabilities which didn't get yet the CVID, the certificate, and also some exploits that are not inside exploit DB and can be on some proof of concept exploits in some unofficial forums. That there are some things, there are kind of things that also looking for, because let's say, for example, the log4j vulnerability, which was also in the last year, it was really well known, and I'm not sure if many knows that log4j, or in other words, log4j, the concept of this vulnerability was already published in 2016. It was presented in Black Hat. So if something like this is known for so many years and it was published in that way and been attacked just now, it's something that we want to find and figure out before, and not only when something so big and severe happens. So that's also some of the cases we try to find out before.
Yes, we have now a question from a European consulting firm. The question is the following: what additional value can be found beyond the ones on the internet? Like, what's there except looking and crawling the internet?
So, of course, we have our pentest and research team, which they actually find some 0 days and some vulnerabilities less known, because as we know, the vehicle, it's really not all about the open source software. There are also hardware and closed source software, which is really, it's harder to find vulnerabilities in online sources for that case. So that's something that the research team is doing, and give some vulnerabilities which is really valuable to the customer also. And we also have the IDS system that collects anomalies in real time from the road. So if some vehicle send us on live some attacks that occurs inside the vehicle, the teams here know how to investigate those events, and then after the incident and the reports, we can understand exactly if there are some vulnerabilities that occurred on real time and we didn't found out before. So that's something also that only enrich the data of it.
So threat intelligence is about multiple sources of information, some of them for the public internet, some of them for all kinds of sources beyond the public internet, like the dark web, and there are things that are unique to us, and those are things that are detected by our experts, by our penetration team, cybersecurity experts, which do not exist out there, and this actually creates an advantage here because we have information which is not available worldwide. So let's look at the asset management. So the second foundation for all this vulnerability management is information regarding the target, the ECUs and the vehicle. So for the system to work properly, we need to receive the information regarding the ECU software bill of material. This is called the SBOM. And if we speak about an OEM, the OEM has a vehicle, and we have the in-vehicle network, the IVN architecture, so we know which ECU is connected to which ECU, and if there is a potential kill chain, we know from which ECU, compromised ECU, a threat and an attack, and move laterally to another ECU, and this way create a chain of events. So all this information can be fed into our system either by connection through an API, and there are several standard APIs in this respect, or direct access to the database, or the asset management and configuration database. It can be fed manually via Excel files or similar things. So there are many ways in which this information can be fed into the system. Most important is to mention that we need to have the full picture. So this would be our main target now, is to get the full asset management information. And then we know of numerous problems such as lack of visibility, lack of information sharing by tier ones. We know about discrepancies, not all the information always correct. Can you give us some insights about how we can acquire this asset information? How do we cope with those problems, which we know that they are in the market? This is something that everyone has encountered at some point of time.
So yeah, it's something that we are really, unfortunately, really aware of it. It's something that we always see. What actually happens that, as you know, each vehicle has multiple suppliers. It's not only about one. Each ECU has different third-party suppliers, and the API that you mentioned that connect to the asset management database of the OEMs basically builds on those suppliers' information on their software BOM. So some of the things that happen is, for example, one of them, it's about the naming of the software package. For example, they can send something like to say some software is called libsqlite 3 instead of SQLite, and this little change can make us miss a lot of crucial vulnerabilities. And also there are differences in the versioning. So that's something we have a solution for it in naming variation inside our system that can find those differences and change it automatically, so we will be able to find all the vulnerabilities. And not only that, also many times the software BOM includes really high-level names, really high-level packages, which can also have dependencies which are not written in the SBOM. So what has happened, it's also something that can make us miss some of the critical vulnerabilities. So in SiMotive, we have the knowledge, we know how to recognize those things. We know that if someone is send us that the vehicle has Android, we also know what it means and what their dependencies of it. But not only that, if we have the actual image or the actual ECU, we can do our own SBOM and show the gaps between the software BOM that we got from the suppliers and the one that we extract all the architecture and software by our own, which is the most preferred way to us, but that's some of the solutions we have.
So we have now a question from a European OEM. From the real life, they say that tier ones are not always cooperative in providing the full information regarding the SBOM. And the question is, how do we address those things? So let me refer to this in case, and we, as Eden just said, the information is not full and we need to read the precise information, the deep information, need to do some tweaks to understand what is really inside there. So we can take the image. One of the things that we can do is, if we have the physical device, we can access the device using a serial interface and query the device for the software information, all the libraries and packages and operating system which is there. We can take the image and perform a reverse engineering on the image, decompiling it, inquiring it, and getting all the information regarding the software which is inside and the code which is inside and the compiled flags, and then the other information such as fixed passwords, hard-coded password that might be found in the code. So there are many things that we can do beyond the things which are directly achievable from the database and the SBOM. And even if we're not provided with full information, we can get to the full information using our technologies and our skills and qualifications. So this is important to understand, that it's not a straightforward, simple task, plug in, plug out, get the information. It requires a lot of capabilities of the product that is doing a lot of the automation process, and it requires some skills of the team which is operating this tool to reach the real deep answers regarding the software. So Eden, can you please explain us a bit about what is the difference and what is specific in the automotive industry, and how is it different from the IT? Like, how do you map CVs to ECUs, given there are huge numbers of CVs and not all of them are relevant? So how do you do the mapping, and how do you know to extract the relevant one to our industry, to the automotive, and discard those which are really not relevant to us? Otherwise you have huge amounts of information that you cannot cope with.
Yeah, so you are talking about something that we call profiling stage. So after, as you said, we get a Tbone and we have our assets inside the system. Each ECU we get go through a process called profiling, which is the exact process when we are give some criteria and values to each ECU. It can be the interfaces of the ECU. If it's physical or remotely, for example, one ECU can have Bluetooth, one ECU can have USB, which is also a different kind of interfaces. We also tell on which CAN bus the ECU is located. It can be online CAN bus, and also it can be on a CAN bus which is more isolated, which also will affect the score of the vulnerabilities related to that ECU. Also Ethernet VLAN, for example, and also about the functionality of the ECU. The functionalities really impact on the CVEs, how they will affect each ECU. One of them can be infotainment, one of them can be body control, so each one of them has different functionalities. So many other risk tags that we mentioned. So that's how we know to find out exactly what is more relevant to you. And for example, automatically you can find, as you said, thousands of vulnerabilities for each ECU. Well, that's the example of Linux kernel. Each Linux kernel is on daily basis 100, if not 1,000 of vulnerabilities, and many of them is not relevant to the ECU, because let's say one of these Linux vulnerability is about the Marvel Wi-Fi chip. And then you are, okay, this ECU have Wi-Fi chip, Marvel Wi-Fi chip, exactly, this kind of chip, and maybe other ECU don't have even any Wi-Fi communication. So those the things that the profiling stage help us to reduce all of that automatically and find only the most relevant and critical ones.
So this is basically a tool automation which helps us and your team to focus on the relevant and important things, and would clean out and discard all those things which are not relevant, and this way you can save a lot of time and focus on the real things which are real threats relevant to a vehicle, and not relevant. Those which are not relevant will be just discarded, and you'll save a lot of time, and you'll come with a better solution. More things that we can mention here is reverse engineering, which can be done on the image, and we can extract a lot of information from there. We can do environment inspection and make sure that the environment, the code, the compilation, nothing is left there. And if there's vulnerabilities, we can be detected not just only by analyzing the Tbone, but also analyzing the code and analyzing the environment. All those can direct us into direction that indicate that there are some things that need to be mitigated later down the road. So, Eden, can you please explain us how do you map between CVSs and risks? So how do you do the mapping? How do you know which CVS relates to which risks? How those risks are scored? Some more insight in this area.
It's a little bit tough topic, so I will try to be as much as high level and simple as I can. As we know, how do you calculate risk score? So risk score is the combination of visibility and impact. Visibility also called by effort, how much is hard or easy to implement some vulnerability, and the impact is also called for damage potential. What is the maximum damage that can be to the vehicle if the vulnerability will be implemented. So the first stage is, as you remember from the profiling, we give the functionalities to each ECU. So each functionality has its own damage potential score that are decided by the OEMs. It's something that we decide together. So they give the value for the damage potential for the impact of the functionality. And then we have in the order and the many data that we collect inside the threat intelligence about each vulnerability inside those ECUs. So you have the functionality and you have the relevant and critical vulnerabilities that we did in the last stage. And for each vulnerability, you also know based on the exploits and and on the data you have if what is the effort that might be done for to implement this, and also the impact of the vulnerability inside the ECU in terms of availability, integrity, and confidentiality. Those three things that also are written in the regulation. So with those combination of things and with all those values, we get a risk score, which sometimes is really surprising because some vulnerability can really, as it's easy to implement and has a lot of exploits, but in the end would not affect that much on the ECU, or otherwise something that automatically we get from the sources as low scored, but in the end, based on the regulation, they are really critical to the vehicle.
So we have a very interesting question here from a large US OEM. So, and I really agree with this question. It's a good question and it's really relevant. So how do you accommodate internal risk management policy and consideration which are specific to us? That means that this OEM has their own policy. We come with our own policy, which might be very good, but how do we cope? How we give a solution with specific to the specifics of this OEM, which might be different than other OEMs? So we need to understand how we can cope with this thing.
So it's really it's also some topic that we deal with every day. It's really well known that each OEM and each supplier has their own ways to calculate risk. It's something that everyone faced with. I just can tell that our risk algorithm was tested a lot, and it came with a lot of knowledge also with the OEMs we work with, and also here inside of Simotive, so it's not something that we developed out of the blue, and so we really trust our algorithms, and also it's really dynamic. It's really easy for us to customize this algorithm for each customer and for each suppliers that might want to fit it to exactly his needs. So it's something that really easy for us to do, and we do it.
Another question from the audience, this time from Japan. Vehicles are composed from a network of ECU, so it's much more than one ECU. So if you look only at the risks of an ECU, you don't see the whole vehicle. So how do you see the whole vehicle as a full body and something which is a living creature? It's not something which is one ECU at a time. So how do we relate to the whole holistic picture of a full vehicle?
I agree. As I said at the beginning of this, the vehicle really became a network on wheels. So yes, we get every time specific ECU or sometimes an entire vehicle, but in the stage when we get the assets and the ECU, we are able to tag them in the profiling stage with exactly which CAN bus they are located on which Ethernet VLAN, and which other ECUs they are communicated with, and also each vulnerability has its own values. For example, each vulnerability we know to detect the exact attack type. So So remote code execution and command injection, those kind of vulnerabilities will be more relevant to lateral movement. It will increase the chance that attacker might remotely attack some, infotainment on those kind of ECU and try to jump between the ECUs. If you see that some of the ECUs share the same vulnerabilities, share the same software, that's also something that we raise to our customer. And other thing that we have is we have a MITRE ATT&CK heatmap solution inside the system. It's really well-known thing, the MITRE ATT&CK, and really easy to use. So what we do with it in the system, and we know how to automatically do for each ECU, for each vehicle, an entire kill chain based on the CVEs and exploits that exist inside each ECU. So it's something really beautiful that they can see inside the system that also helps.
So the heat map is a real useful tool in your case, because it gives you the focus on the right things.
Also the technique, they can say exactly what will mostly will happen inside the ECU. If it's some technique about persistence, also specifically for lateral movement, denial of service, such kind of things. So Gilad, how would you address the risk that detected?
So for the risk, we need to prioritize them. So there are more severe risk and less severe risks, and we need to prioritize them. For each of those risks, we need to apply a control or a mitigation, since our target is to do risk minimization. So as the process goes on, we'll reduce more and more risks by addressing them with appropriate mitigations. Let's look a bit on the technical perspective of those mitigations. So maybe then you can explain us a bit about those things.
My team is always think in this recommendation plan on something that will be for long term, as I believe that you can't fix everything on cybersecurity, so we try to give the best recommendation that will stay as long as we can and be as much as relevant as easy for the customer. So one of the things that we do after we gather all the critical vulnerabilities, as we did before, and find the most vulnerable software packages, the first thing that we give the customer is, of course, the patches, the fixes for that specific vulnerabilities, if that exists. Sometimes we don't have it. The next stage we do is, of course, we can recommend on a newer version of that software, but we always check. We don't tend to recommend on the newest one because many reasons. One of them is the functionality of this newer version. As much as the software is newer, so it may affect also on the vehicle capabilities. So it's something that we take in consideration. Also, if something is new, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own risk, or tomorrow morning it won't be a new vulnerabilities, a new attack. So we look on the entire versioning for each software, and then we are looking for which exactly vulnerabilities each version has, which risk each version also have, and also we are looking for each version its end of support and end of life dates, because if we will recommend on some software and only in 1 year it's not going to be supported anymore, it will be really hard to our customer to fix the newer vulnerabilities that will occur. So that's also the things that we are looking for, and also if the software is stable enough, if it's well used, what is the comments over the internet for those specific software. And not only that, as we mentioned on Tesla, some decided to go to alternative software. Some decide to change from one software to another, for example, from OpenSSL to WolfSSL, because of the vulnerabilities and support those software has. So there are multiple ways to do it.
Yeah, we have now a question from an OEM in Italy. How is this related to a cybersecurity management system, any interface? So today we're speaking about vulnerability management, but this carlet is connected to our CSMS system that we're going to discuss in a separate session. So all this information actually fed into the cybersecurity management system. All the information is being provided. It can be using our CSMS, it can be other CSMSs using any API. So definitely the CARLET has its own reason to exist, but also has a very important role in the overall cybersecurity management system as a feed to the information and the reports and the artifacts required for the assessment and auditing process.
Gilad, what is the best practice for an OEM or Tier 1 too?
So, excellent question. The answer would be you'd need to start from day zero. So you build a secure by design approach, and you start it from the day you start to plan the ECU. So you plan the cybersecurity in place from there, and you are looking at vulnerabilities as you develop the code. So once the process secure software development lifecycle is running, you need to analyze the vulnerabilities and address them and mitigate them and reduce the risks during the development. This would be the best approach. Obviously, along the life cycle of the vehicle and of the issue, you need to continue to monitor those vulnerabilities as time goes by, since new vulnerabilities are detected and they might influence the running vehicle. You might have a new piece of software that you want to upload to the vehicle, and then obviously you need to verify that it does not include any vulnerabilities and make sure the vehicle is safe.
How should consulting firms and system integrators relate to the whole process?
So you need to optimize the vulnerability management process in the cybersecurity management, and the best way to do it is to try to move away from old methods like using Excel files and using manual methods because those are not up to date. There is no way to continuously monitor the vulnerabilities. You need to do it in a tedious fashion. You might miss things. So the best approach would be to use a tool that would automate the process, that will assist the group, the company in the vulnerability management, which will document everything. So if you took a step, you need to have an audit trail in which you see what was done, and if there is an event, you can go back and investigate what happened and what was the reason for this decision. So my advice would be, take a good tool, use it either internally with your own workforce that will are going to use this tool, your cyber expert, or use an external company that would provide this service, and this way the vulnerability management is best handled.
So Gilad, what is the best practice for an OEM or Tier 1?
So my advice to OEMs and Tier 1s, and actually anyone who is developing software, to start with vulnerability management from day zero. So as you engage in the secured software development lifecycle, you need to take a secure by design approach. That means that you need to make sure that all the vulnerabilities are handled as you develop. You should not reach the end of the development and then discover that you have vulnerabilities in the code. So this is step one. Step two is, while the vehicle and once the software is in use, you need to continuously monitor the vulnerabilities in the code, because maybe new vulnerabilities are discovered that you weren't aware about them earlier, and there might be new pieces of software that you need to upload into the vehicle, and then you need to make sure that they are clean of any vulnerability. This work has to be done in cooperation between Tier 1s and the OEM. So anyone involved in the software development need to take the cybersecurity approach as part of the software development, and do this in full cooperation, full transparency, and full visibility, so we have safer vehicles on the road.
How should the consulting firms and system integrators relate to the whole process?
So this should be optimized, and you need to take the best approach, which will reach at the end of the day to the best outcome with the lowest cost. So I would advise in this case to use a product that would manage the vulnerability management. Yes, you can do it with Excel files and you can do this manually, but this is a tedious process. It will take a long time. The result will not be good. You might miss things It's hard to document things when you do it manually. So if you take a product which accompanies all along the process, and everything inside is done automatic, so it saves a lot of time, it brings you the right results, and it has all the documentation and the audit trail along the process. So if anything was done, if any decision was reached, and any change was made along the life cycle of the software, then you have this information and you can relate to it, and you can investigate if anything happens later in a time. So let's look about what would be the take-home messages. So first of all, the process is continuous. You need to take a continuous vulnerability management approach. This is a cornerstone in the cybersecurity management system. It is required by regulation. It is required if you want to have a safer vehicle. Acquisition, all the data acquisition, the asset acquisition is a critical phase, because this is the basis of everything. So you need to have all the chain, all the supply chain cooperating in the process of providing this information and having this collected into a central place, so you have the overall picture of all the software that you have in the vehicle. All the software development organization need to take part of it. So it's a tier 2, it's any outsourced company, it can be a software house, it can be the tier 1, the OEMs that have their own software organization. Everyone should take part in this process. Use the product. As I said, using a product will bring you the best results. Don't do it manually. It doesn't work. It takes too much time. Use the product, you will get the best results to manage the vulnerabilities. And last thing, if you have your own cybersecurity expert and you have the capacity to do it, you have the skills, you have the know-how, you can do it internally using the product. If not, you can always go to a third-party consulting company that will lead you and will provide you all the service along the way. This way you can get, at the end of the day, a safe, secure, and compliant. So thank you, Eden, for this very interesting day. It was a real pleasure. We learned today a lot, and I think that we can help our friends in the industry with all the information that we provided here.
Thank you, Gilad. I really enjoyed it.
So thank you for attending this webinar. For more information, please contact us at the address which appears here on the slide. And see you until next time. Bye.